then it occurred to me to tell my local boss that I gave this interview. And he said, well, what'd you tell him? I said, well, I told him what I just said to you. He said, you did? He says, oh, I better call Taylor, his boss. And he called Taylor, and I came back into his office, and he said, you're fired. I said, I'm fired? He says, you're fired. Taylor fired you. Taylor told me to fire you. So, well, I was fired. I said, you know, I don't know how you can fire me. My title is permanent member, which was. I started as a temporary member, and then I became a permanent member. And the boss was very funny. He said, well, here's the difference between a temporary member and a permanent member. A temporary member has a contract. Permanent member doesn't. I had no contract, so I was out of there. And it was amusing. I mean, I had solved this big math problem that I told you about, this 6-year thing. I knew I was going to get a job very easily, so I wasn't really worried about that.
You've honed your skills with algorithms,
yeah.
And you've learned a lot about computers. So
yeah.
I'm seeing the writing on the wall here for where things go next. How do we progress to you?
Yeah, so at a certain point, then I went to Stony Brook. After this, it was chair, and did this work with Churn, and did some work with Cheeger, and we got stuck. We were trying to prove something, mathematical thing, and it was very, very frustrating. Worked on it for about 2 years. We got nowhere. I mean, it's okay to work for a long time if you feel you're getting somewhere, but we got absolutely nowhere on this problem. And my father had made a little bit of money, and I had the opportunity to try investing it, and that was interesting. And I thought, you know, I'm going to try another career altogether. And so I went into the money management business, so to speak.
So you started with some of your dad's money, and that got you a taste for an interest in it?
Yeah, some family money. And then some other people put up some money. And I did that. No models for the first 2 years.
So what were you doing then? You were just using cunning and, just like normal people do?
Like normal people do. And I brought in a couple of people to work with me. And we were extremely successful. I think it was just plain good luck, but nonetheless, we were very successful. But I could see that this was a very gut-wrenching business. You know, you come in one morning, you think you're a genius, the markets are for you. We were trading currencies and commodities and financial instruments and so on, not stocks, but those kinds of things. And then the next morning you come and you feel like a jerk, the market's against you. It was very gut-wrenching. And in looking at the patterns of prices, I could see that there was something we could study here, that there were maybe some ways to predict prices mathematically or statistically. And I started working on that, and then brought in some other people, and gradually we built models, and the models got better and better, and finally the models replaced the fundamental stuff. So it took a while.
I would have thought, with your background and mathematician, this would have almost occurred to you immediately, like you would have straight away seen this. What was the 2-year delay?
Well, two things. I saw it pretty early, and I brought in a guy who was a wonderful guy, also from the code cracking place, and he was, I thought, together we'll start building models. That was fairly early, but it wasn't right away. But he got more interested in the fundamental stuff, and he says the models aren't going to be very strong, and so on and so forth. So we didn't get very far, but I knew there were models to be made. Then I brought in another mathematician and a couple more, and a better computer guy. And then we started making models which really worked. But, you know, the general, there's something called the efficient market theory, which says that there's nothing in the data, let's say price data, which will indicate anything about the future, because the price is sort of always right. The price is always right in some sense. But that's just not true. So there are anomalies in the data, even in the price history data. For one thing, commodities especially used to trend, not dramatically trend, but trend. So if you could get the trend right, you'd bet on the trend, and you'd make money more often than you wouldn't, whether it was going down or going up. That was an anomaly in the data, but gradually we found more and more and more and more anomalies. None of them is so overwhelming that you're going to clean up on a particular anomaly, because if they were, other people would have seen them. So they have to be subtle things. And you put together a collection of these subtle anomalies, and you begin to get something that will predict pretty well.
How elaborate are these things? Because in my head, I'm imagining, you know, some equation like Pythagoras equation. You put a few numbers in and something spits out. But are these giant beasts of equations and algorithms, or are they simple things?
Well, the system, as it is today, is extraordinarily elaborate. But it's not a whole lot of, it's what's called machine learning. So you find things that are predictive. You might guess, oh, such and such should be predictive, might be predictive, and you test it out in the computer, and maybe it isn't, maybe it isn't. You test it out on long-term historical data and price data and other things, and then you add to the system this if it works, and if it doesn't, you throw it out. So there aren't elaborate equations, at least not for the prediction part. But the prediction part is not the only part. You have to know what your costs are when you trade. You're going to move the market when you trade. Now, the average person will buy 200 shares of something, and he's not going to move the market at all because it's too small. But if you want to buy 200,000 shares, you're going to push the price. How much are you going to push the price? How are you going to, are you going to push it so far that you can't make any money because you've distorted things so much? So you have to understand costs, and that's something that's important. And then you have to understand how to minimize the volatility of the whole assembly of positions that you have, and be. So you have to do that. That last part takes some fairly sophisticated applied mathematics, not earth-shattering, but fairly sophisticated.
What discipline of mathematics or disciplines? Is it multidisciplinary, or are we talking?
It's mostly statistics. It's mostly statistics, and some probability theory, but I can't get into what things we do use and what things we don't use. We reach for different things that might be effective. So we're very universal. We don't have any, but it's a big computer model. For one thing, there is a capacity to the major model. It can manage a certain amount of money, which is rather large, but it can't manage an enormous amount of money, because you're going to end up pushing the market around too much. So it's kind of a sweet spot as to how much it's reasonable to manage. Therefore, it would never grow into some behemoth which would take everybody out, and you'd be the only player. I mean, well, of course, if you were the only player, there'd be no one to play against. There are limitations, at least the way we see it. But we keep improving it. We have about 100 PhDs working for the firm.
That's what I mean. How did you get to that point? Did you start to think, we need this, we need that?
We just hired smart people. My algorithm has always been, you get smart people together, you give them a lot of freedom, create an atmosphere where everyone talks to everyone else. They're not hiding in a corner with their own little thing. They talk to everybody else, and you provide the best infrastructure, the best computers and so on that people can work with, and make everyone partners. So that was the model that we used in Renaissance. So we would bring in smart folks, and they didn't know anything about finance, but they learned.
What was your employment criteria then? If they knew nothing about finance, what were you looking for in them?
Someone with a PhD in physics and who'd had 5 years out and had written a few good papers and was obviously a smart guy, or in astronomy, or in mathematics, or in statistics. Someone who had done science and done it well and was interested in, applying his mind, or her mind, although it was mostly his, to, modeling markets and making money. But it's a very good spirit. Now, I've been 6 years away from the company, so I'm not running it anymore. But I'm the chair of the board, and I go to a monthly board meeting. I think the morale is very good, the spirit is good, and it's really a very good way to work scientifically. It's a big collaborative effort, and everyone is happy to see someone else come up with something good, because he, the first person, is going to share in that, because everyone shared in the profits. So okay, you might wish it was you to show how smart you were, but nonetheless, good, he did it, I'm going to make money from it.
I would imagine lots of people want to be financially successful. Most people want that, of course.
I suppose.
And lots of people are good at mathematics and know a lot about computers, like, at your level, I would imagine. Why did you do it? Why didn't someone else do it?
I don't know. Well, first of all, some other people have done it. I think that our firm is better, but nonetheless, I'm pretty sure of that. But nonetheless, other people have done some very good modeling, and so we're not alone. But it's not easy to do, and there's a big barrier to entry. For example, huge data sets that we've collected over the years, programs that we've written to make it really easy to test hypotheses and so on. The infrastructure is exceptionally good, so everything is tuned right. It took years to learn how to do that. People don't leave our firm, or if they do, they leave to just do something else altogether. Everyone has signed a forever non-disclosure agreement and so on, because we're very secretive about what we do. Because you can't patent that stuff or copyright it, because then everyone would see what it is, and someone would just work around it and say, oh, that patent's no good. Look, I made this twist and that tweak, and it's different. So you can't. What you have is your intellectual property, and you have to keep that to yourself. So, yes, we were very successful, continue to be. As I say, there are others, but very few investment operations are 100%, because this is 100% model driven. It's not 90% or 80%. Some people have models and for advice. They say, oh, what does the model say? Oh, yeah, let's go. Oh, I don't know. Forget that. I don't want to pay attention to that. So, but, Renaissance is 100% model driven. No trade is ever made because someone walks into the trading room and says, hey, let's buy IBM. It's a sure winner, or anything like that. We got too much Google. We got to show it. Nobody does that. It may be that we had too much Google, but nonetheless, he might have been right. But it's just what the model says. And that religious sticking to the model is the only way you can run such a business, because you cannot simulate that guy who walked in and said, hey, Google's too high, let's sell it. How can you simulate that? You don't know what might have happened. But you can you can come up with a model or a new predictor, and you can simulate it in the past and see, how did it do? So you have to stick to it.
I know you guys made the model, so you do have the ownership of it and feel proud of it. But is it hard to follow the model religiously? Like, is it hard for your ego to think all the success is because of the computer? Like, and I just sat there and watched?
No, the computer's just a tool that we use to. I mean, it's a good cabinet maker doesn't say it's all because of my wonderful chisel. You may have great film equipment, but that's not why you're a success at doing what you're doing. You're working with good equipment, but another guy would make a mess of it with the same equipment. So, no, we don't feel, oh, the computer is doing everything. The computer does what you tell it to do.
Mathematics is very collaborative, and things that are learned are built upon by sharing. Are you learning things behind the locked doors at Renaissance that could help mathematics, but you're not sharing because you want to keep them a secret to help the business?
No. Well, there's nothing. There's nothing that we're learning behind locked doors in Renaissance that would help the general field of mathematics or the general field of science, as far as I can tell.
Do you think there's something about your personality that made you able to do it, or is it just luck?
Well, I think a lot of it's luck. I probably have a good personality for running a group of people, but there are other people who maybe even have a better personality for doing that. We underestimate the role of luck. It's typical that if someone fails at something, he'll say, I had bad luck. And if he makes a success, he'll say, I was a smart guy. And, oh, I was just lucky. People don't usually say that if they make a big success. And of course, obviously, not everyone can make a big success, but I think the luck played a role. I was in the right place at the right time. But I think what I'm good at is getting good people to work together.
So it was more, you would think it was more your managerial ability than your mathematical genius that resulted in the business?
It definitely wasn't my mathematical genius. I think I'm a pretty smart guy. I can understand this stuff. So, but I wasn't, and I did come up with a few predictive algorithms, so that was fine. But many people did. I knew I wasn't going to come up with all of them, so that's why we have all these folks. So it wasn't my mathematical genius, but I think people respected me because I was a good scientist. So they said, well, he may act stupid, but we know he's really smart. So
you had a few runs on the board, they would say.
Yeah.
Given that you will put some of it down to luck, what are you more proud of? All of this in the business, or the mathematics from that first half of your career?
Oh. To the extent that I'm proud, I think I'm proud of both. I think, I've done some mathematics and some of it's had a positive effect, and I guess I'm proud of that. And I've built a nice business, and I'm proud of that. I don't say I'm prouder of one than the other. And now for the last number of years, I've been working with my wife on this foundation, which she started actually in '94 with my money, but nonetheless, she started the foundation, and then I joined. I got more and more involved with the foundation as time went on, and now that's my main thing, and I'm pretty proud of the foundation.
Let me focus you more on the mathematics versus the business then. Would you trade any or all of your business success for being the man who cracked the Riemann hypothesis or something like that? Right.
No, that's a good question. Would I trade that for? Well, I probably trade some of it. I mean, for the Riemann hypothesis, it would certainly, I guess, be a thrill to solve the Riemann hypothesis. I'm pleased, mostly with the way my career has gone. Would I trade part of it for something? I don't know. I've never looked back and said, I wish, at least in business, I wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I had done this and not that, whatever it is. I've never looked back that way.
I guess the thing I'm getting at is, what do you define yourself as, a businessman or a mathematician?
Well, I would not be very good at running an ordinary business. If I had to run a big manufacturing business or something like that, I don't think I'd be very good at. There's a level of detail that I would find tedious. I'm not the best organized person in the world, and frankly, I would be bored. So I'm not your typical businessman. The kind of business that I did run was very natural to me. So in that sense, I was a businessman. I like business, sort of. I always say what's the important mathematics skill in business is subtraction. You have to understand when your revenues are going to exceed your costs. Some people, they just look at revenues. Hey, we're growing. Yeah, but you're losing money every day. Well, that'll take care of itself after a while. So, but I don't think I'd be. I once had to, for about 6 months, run a small business in the computer area, a business that we had started, or invested in, and then wasn't going well, and we had to get rid of the head and find someone new, and I found myself running it for about 3 to 6 months, commuting to Philadelphia. And I came to the conclusion, I'm doing a better job than the guy was there before, but I'm not doing a very good job. And I found myself in business meetings like with the distributor from St. Louis and I remember saying that thing, what am I doing, spending my time with some distributor from St. Louis? I mean, this is not the way I want to run my life. Finally, we got someone in. He really knew how to run a business, and then that was that kind of a business.